Hello and welcome back to the third rail. The Layout 2025 series continues. In the last episode, we configured a wireless automated block system on the main lines. Today, we will turn our attention to the center of the layout with the installation of the terminal and the configuration of its access paths. I'll also cover a few related topics based on your questions along the way. Throughout the series, links to the track plan in several formats will be available in the video description. The video is organized in chapters for ease of navigation. Last thing before we set off, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe and alert button before leaving today. Super thanks are also available if you feel the content deserves it. Whatever the option you choose will be much appreciated. Many thanks. Now, let's head over to the room. The layout is pretty much unchanged since the last video. I have just positioned a signal and a couple of switching tracks on the inner loop. We'll cover what they are for later in this video. But most of my time was invested in getting all the kit I need for this stage of the build ready. This took much longer than I would have expected because most of the stuff I will be installing are items I have never used since acquiring them. This type of things always requires some attention, so needs to be tested and often adjusted, which can be time-consuming. I had also exhausted my stock of wireless controllers, so I had to assemble a new batch, which involved what felt like a lifetime of soldering. Then, of course, test and configure everything. Altogether, the stuff I have laid out for today swallowed about 30 man-hours. You wouldn't believe that looking at them. Anyway, we are ready to go now, so let's take care of this terminal. We'll start with a quick refresher, which might double as a brief introduction for some of you who joined at a later stage in the series. The station is made of a pair of pass-through lines and a terminal. The pass-through lines are already set up on the top left of the inner loop, and they are integrated in the automated block system. What we are missing is the terminal section that will be located lower down in this vacant space. If we switch to the track plan for a moment, we can see that the terminal should comprise of 5 parallel tracks, 4 for passengers and 1 for goods. The terminal is one of the features that attracted me to the Märklin plan I based this layout on. In addition to acting as origin and destination for mainline traffic, it offers many options in terms of maneuvers. Locomotives can be remotely uncoupled and parked at the end of the passenger tracks, enabling engine swaps or shunting of rolling stock. I kept it pretty much as is. The main difference is that the access to the terminal tracks has been shifted away from the main line. This allows movements between the depot and terminal when trains are circulating on the inner loop, and I have planned to use a dedicated power district to do this. This is reflected by the different track and transformer colors on the track plan. We have a light violet for the outer loop, white for the inner loop, and salmon, maybe, for the station and depot. I'm a bit colorblind. We can see that the crossing combination in the center has another color, and that is because it will be in mixed use. In addition to linking the station with the main line and depot, it forms a core element of the reverse loops for the main line. My plan was to put something in place to change its track power source based on usage, so that the route between depot and terminal can be operated with a single throttle. But as I am about to install the terminal, I think it would be a shame not to have the same convenience for traffic to and from the mainline. So I am going to change my plans a tiny bit in terms of power districts and combine the crossing and terminal into a single mixed-use sector. This way I'll use one transformer for traffic between the mainline and the terminal, and another one for traffic between the depot and the terminal. I'll cover how I alternate between transformers when I install the depot. Let's proceed with the installation. We'll start with the power district configuration. I'll need to isolate the crossing and access to the terminal from the main line, and we'll also need additional power feed. We'll use the same procedure as with stopping sections for signals. I'll just isolate the center contacts on all relevant joints with a bit of electrical tape. That's it. The area should be without power now. A test with the locomotive shows it is. But we have a small problem. By isolating the crossing, we also introduced a dead zone on the main line at the top in between the two signals and their stopping sections. So we are going to need an additional power feed in this area too. I am going to need to drill a few holes now, so one moment please. Okay, that's the last hole done. Let me vacuum the dust away. Now I'll simply drop the feeder track wire through the hole and reassemble the track section. And we'll follow the same procedure for the crossing and station district. That's it. I'll connect them later on. We can now start laying the track for the terminal, starting with the siding and its turnouts. So let me grab some of the stuff I prepared. It should look roughly like that, but I'll need to check the track plan first. I am still using the train layout app on my iPad for that. And that's the siding in position. Now we'll take care of the stopping sections for the signals we'll have there. I'll isolate the center contact on every apparent turnout joint. And with this done, I'll add just enough track to position the signals. Now I'll use a signal base as a template to cut access traps in the foam tile I use as sound dampener. Then I'll drill all the holes I need. And with that done, I can then label and drop all the turnout wiring through the baseboard. There we go, it's much tidier. Now it is time for signals. Let me grab what I need. There we are. We'll do the first one. I'll install the power wires for the stopping section. And I'll label and drop the control wiring through the hole and position the signal. Lather, rinse, repeat on every other siding. And this is how everything looks like when done. I'll tidy the wiring a bit more once the terminal is finished and connected. I'll add more track to the passenger sidings. And it is now time for some power. I'll route all the power feeds for the crossing and terminal to a central point, basically a dedicated distribution plate. It is the first building block of the mechanism I'll use to toggle the power source. I'll cover it when I install the depot later on. For now, I will simply connect the plate to the transformer used for the inner loop. And it's time for some testing. We'll start with the mainline section, powered by the additional power feed we fitted first. This one is permanently connected to the inner loop power district. Yes, we are moving. Now I'll drive to the terminal and I'll test each siding, operating the signals and turnouts manually for now. And I'll fix issues one by one as I encounter them. No drama involved, it is just a matter of taking the time to do it and not rush anything. I use the same procedure for the installation of the main lines. Okay, with everything operational, it is now time to set up these suckers. They are the same wireless controllers I used everywhere on the layout so far. The content of this box represents 15 hours worth of soldering. It shouldn't take so long, but I have to make manual modifications on each one, so it's a bit of a grueling process. You have seen them before, so I don't need to dwell on the installation. And this is how they look like in situ. I powered them with a new set of distribution plate for the lighting circuit, which I set up in the station area. That's to distribute the load on more wires. Okay, let's see if they work. Look at that. Everything is lit. It's very pretty, isn't it? Let's check they all respond to commands from my dashboard. And it looks like they are. We can now take care of the ends of the passenger sidings. So it's time to get the uncouplers out. Before I can attach them to the truck, I will need to isolate the center contacts. This is to create an isolated section at the end of each siding, which I'll use to park locomotives. This isolation point will also be the end of the stopping section for all the signals. This will allow push-pull trains to remain stationary in push mode. I'll place the usual bit of electrical tape, attach the uncoupler, and a piece of track with a center contact feed wire, a half-length track section, and finally a buffer. And there we go. I need to do the same for the other sidings. I'll drill the holes I need and drop the wiring through the board as well at the same time. One moment, please. And here's the result. Things are taking shape. The passenger sidings are nearly complete now. There is one last thing I need to do, which is to install controls for the uncouplers and the power feeds in the isolated sections. Here I am going to use another type of wireless controller. Here is one. It is based on the same principle as a 7210 control box, which distributes a circuit across 4 outputs, each controlled by a permanent on-off switch. I have set the software up for the controller to behave this way, or like a 7170 controller. That's one of those, used normally for turnouts and signals. It is the same distribution, but with momentary switches. I'll use the 7170 configuration for the uncouplers, and the 7210 configuration for the isolated sections. I've had the circuit boards for these wireless switches made at the same time as the other types I am using a few years back now. But this is the first time ever I will be using them, so it should be quite interesting. They might also throw a few issues at me, I don't know. And this is how everything looks under the board. This was the easiest installation, as I had installed lighting circuit distribution plates close by when I set up the pass-through lines a few episodes ago. I only had to run a single long wire for the track power feed to the isolated sections, which is connected to the same district as the terminal. Okay, let's go back to the surface. I have placed a few locomotives in the terminal. On my dashboard, I can operate the new switches with dedicated panels. Let's try the circuits on the isolated tracks. I'll switch circuit 4 on and turn the throttle up, and the V200 moves, while everything else remains stationary. Good stuff. The V200 stopped as it left the isolated track, and that's because the signal for the siding is red. If I change it to green, we can move again. Works as designed. Now let's try uncoupling. I use another dashboard panel type for that, and we can hear the uncoupler already. It's this one moving over there. So that bit is working. Let's try this with a train. So I'm going to drive and stop over the uncoupler, activate it, and drive forward. Oops, I didn't drive far enough. I still need to get my bearings. Let's do this again. Yes, the coach remains stationary. Okay, let me push things back and I'll try a small maneuver so you can get an idea of the workings. I'm going to move the train, then uncouple and park the locomotive by the buffers. Now I'm going to get the shunter waiting at signal 30. It will move all the way to the entrance of the first siding. Then go and pick up the coach. Everything works as designed. Only the shunter moved, which is what we wanted. Okay, that's it. I think the terminal is now done. There is another point I need to consider for the operation of the terminal, and that would be the traffic flow to and from the main lines. Let's go back to the track plan for a moment. Whatever the destination, the only viable entry or exit point for the terminal is turnout 32, which is this one here. This is because it is the only way trains can directly access each platform given the orientation of their turnouts. Trains exiting the terminal can either travel north over the crossing and join the main line clockwise at turnout 6, or cross over to the depot, or take a right at the crossing combination and travel south to crossing 10 to join the outer loop in counterclockwise direction. Pretty simple. For incoming traffic, things get a bit more complicated. From the depot, we are simply crossing in the other direction, so no drama. From the inner loop, we will use a route starting from signal 9, then turning right at crossing 10, then turning left over the crossing combination towards the entrance. I could use this access path from the outer main line too, following the route we used for the automated block system. So exiting the main line at turnout 16, then using the reverse loop to join the inner loop clockwise at turnout 6, which would then lead us to signal 9. But I wanted to have a more direct route, so I have planned a connection starting at signal 18, turning left across the turnouts, following the inner loop counterclockwise along the top right-hand corner, then turning left and going south over the crossing to the entrance of the terminal. The additional signal I positioned on the inner loop will protect the center crossing from this direction of travel. This should also allow trains to wait there until a platform becomes available in the terminal. With this setup, we will have to deal with the classic challenge of single-line operation on part of the inner loop. Trains traveling counterclockwise will need to go against signal 7, and our new signal, signal 35, will itself need to let clockwise traffic through. I could, of course, simply operate the signals to achieve this, but this wouldn't look good, and more importantly, it would be unsafe as I tend to be quite forgetful. So I will need to set this bidirectional section of the inner loop up in a way that the two signals in operation can be automatically suspended depending on the direction of the traffic. I intend to face this classic challenge in a classic way. Let's start by breaking the problem down. At its core, it has to do with the way a Märklin signal operates. It controls traffic using an inbuilt switch to apply or cut power to an isolated section of track. This section of track is the infamous stopping section I keep mentioning in every episode in the series. It goes live or dead in line with the aspect change of the signal, and its status will influence traffic flow whatever the direction. In single line operation, trains should only observe signals that apply to their direction of travel, so they should be able to drive past a signal set to halt or red when approaching it from the opposite direction. This is something a Märklin or any other signal using power interruption to control traffic cannot do. How can this be addressed? The signal needs to be temporarily suspended, and this can be done by applying power to its stopping section using an additional feed. We can use a relay to control this feed and use control tracks to automate its operation. We'll need to operate it based on the direction of travel, so we'll use a pair of switching tracks. The circuit is simple. We need to connect the shared circuits on the relay to the source of driving current, the red circuit in the Märklin system, and connect one of the relay's output to the stopping section. We'll install additional switching tracks to control the relay. Based on the direction of travel, we'll need one in front of the signal to activate the circuit, and the other one behind the stopping section to deactivate it. And we'll connect the relevant control wires accordingly. With everything set up, a locomotive coming from the opposite direction will activate the switching track. This will toggle the relay and apply power to the stopping section. The signal will remain red, and the locomotive will travel through. When it reaches the second switching track, it will toggle the relay and cut the power. The signal will then regain control, and the next locomotive reaching it in the right direction will stop. Pretty simple. At first sight, the circuit could be used as is for signal 7. For signal 35, I wasn't so sure because it will need to be suspended by trains traveling on 4 different paths, coming from signal 1, from signal 2, from the terminal, and the main line. This scenario sent me down a rabbit hole, if you'll indulge me for a bit. After thinking about this for a while, I first came up with this contraption I jotted on a piece of paper. This would require minor modifications to the crossing area to fit 3 switching tracks, which would look like this. And I even made a slide to explain the circuit. It uses the basic circuit I described earlier on the route from signal 1. This circuit is then reused for the other routes, from where it will be triggered by switching tracks based on conditions set by additional relays mirroring the state of crossing 5 and turnout 33. Trains coming from signal 2 would activate the circuit only when crossing 5 is round. Trains coming from the terminal would activate the circuit when turnout 33 and crossing 5 are both set to straight. The whole thing would of course operate only in the direction of the signal. Feeling content and rather proud of myself, I proceeded to write a script for a dedicated video explaining the workings in detail. As I was recording the voiceover, it suddenly dawned on me that I could have achieved the same functionality with a much simpler setup. Let's look at the routes again. Their paths all merge at turnout 6, so anything traveling towards signal 35 from that point would require its suspension. This is therefore an ideal spot to trigger it, and doing this would only require a basic setup. We can simply shift the signal and stopping section a bit to the right, insert a switching track, and we'll have all we need to install our circuit. Much easier. It is often very easy not to see the forest for the trees. I have already configured the inner loop track, I moved the signal and added all the required switching tracks. So all I need to do now is to crawl under the board to install the relays. The easiest way to tap into a stopping section is to cut the signal wire and add some plugs and use the cross connector for the additional feed. This is how the setup for signal 35 looks like. The signal wiring was already configured with plugs, so I left the long wires as they were. For signal 7, I used the same circuit, but I had the additional complication of the presence of a braking section after the stopping section, which also needs to be bypassed, so trains don't slow down for no reason. I had to add a relay to do this, which toggles the feed to the braking section between the braking module and the transformer, based on the status of the suspension. In short, its control wires are simply plugged into the other relays and change at the same time. Okay, let's give this a try. We'll start with signal 35, which is set to red. I am going to send a locomotive waiting at signal 1 on its way. The locomotive simply drives past signal 35. Excellent. So we'll drive past the switching track and stop. Now we'll reverse and go towards signal 35. And we are stopping. Cool. That's the behavior we wanted. Now, signal 7. It's the same opposite direction scenario. The locomotive moves towards signal 7. It drives past and maintains its speed over the curve where the braking section is located. So the suspension is working for both signal and braking section. We stop after the switching track. We'll reverse and drive back towards signal 7. We are slowing down on the curve, so the braking module is active again. And we stop at signal 7, exactly as it should be. Okay, I think we are done for this phase of the build. We'll switch to a few scenes of traffic while I briefly cover next steps to finish the video. Next time we will finally install the depot and shunting area. The installation will involve uncouplers, a turntable, a transfer table, and the small challenge of having to cross the main line to travel between the depot and the terminal. Something to look forward to. I shall mention already that I don't intend to go into too much detail about the turntable because there is already a long channel video on the topic. It is not the most pleasant to listen to, as it was one of my earliest videos, but it covers the tiniest of details, and the feedback I frequently get is that it is helpful. A new version is on my to-do list though, but I don't know when it will be done. Aside from this topic, as ever, I would welcome your suggestions on stuff to cover and be happy to answer questions you might have. I shall monitor the comments section over the next few days, and I will adjust my plans for the next video accordingly. Alright, that was it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully enough for you to give it a like, maybe subscribe if you haven't already done so, or even send a super thanks my way if you feel the video was worth it. Thanks as ever for all your support, and bye for now.